It's time again where I spend 24 hours reading a YA dystopian fantasy novel from the early 2000s. This time it's the Hush Hush series by Becca Fitzpatrick, and it was chosen by you all in a poll. This one I read when it came out, which was like 15 years ago. It was a while ago. I think this came out in like 2009 maybe. So read this back when it came out, and I don't remember much about it. What I do remember is I had a coworker at the time who was obsessed with this series. It's the first time I'd ever heard of a book boyfriend, and Patch was her book boyfriend. Speaking of other things, I remember the main character's name, or the male main character's name. His name is Patch. I don't remember the girl's name, but she's kind of like one of those generic insert characters, so I don't think I was supposed to remember her. Patch is a fallen angel. In my mind, this series is similar to Cassandra Clare's Shadowhunter series, where I always saw like Patch and Jace is the same person, except for Patch had wings and Jace didn't. So let's see if my memory is correct as far as this goes. I have 24 hours to read it. I'll check in with you multiple times throughout this reading vlog, and it's going to be filled with spoilers on what's going on in these books. Is there anything problematic? Is there anything you need to know? We'll find out together. I'm a little over 100 pages into Hush Hush, and I figured it's time for the first check-in. It's kind of info dumpy. It's literally the science classroom scene from Twilight, where Nora, our female main character, gets paired up with Patch, except for instead of Bella, I mean Nora, being the transfer, Patch is the transfer. Patch is a senior, and Nora is a sophomore, 10th grade. And the author uses this seating assignment to be an info dump because the teacher assigns them a get-to-know-your-partner assignment, and Patch already knows everything about Nora, but she doesn't know anything about him, and he basically doesn't tell her anything, and so she gets pissed about it. But he gives her his phone number, and then they meet up at a sketchy arcade. I'm not really sure how an arcade is supposed to be sketchy, but this one is a sketchy arcade. Again, we don't learn anything about Patch in this info dump, but we learn quite a bit about Nora. She's anemic and has to take iron pills pretty much all the time. She likes photography. She works on the school's e-zine, and if you don't know what an e-zine is, it's because you're not old like I am. And an e-zine is a internet-only magazine. So they do the school's e-zine, which means there's no print, it's just on the internet. They call that like a blog, or just a magazine these days. Like, zine is not a word that is used very often any longer. She's kind of a goody two-shoes. She's trying to get into an Ivy League college. She's judgmental and controlling, according to herself and Patch. She plays the cello, and her father was murdered the year previously, which I remember that being important to the story. All we know about Patch is that he's a mysterious bad boy, and he smells like cigars. We also need to introduce you to Nora's best friend, V, who is going to be our problematic character as far as 90s diet culture goes. V is literally described as a few pounds over curvy, and she is on like a fad diet, which is the color fruit diet. So she has to eat 3 green fruits and 2 red fruits and a handful of some other color fruit. Like, it's a really shitty diet. She's considering things like Red Hots and other kind of candies as a type of fruit. Cinnamon's a fruit, or vanilla donuts is a white fruit. Nora has some weird shit happen to her. She's driving V's car home because V doesn't want to drive in the fog, and this man like runs out of the road. He's wearing a ski mask. He smashes into the front of the car, tries to like pound the metal door open, shatters the glass. She freaks out, drives off, gets to V's house, runs inside to V, and comes back out, and the car's fine. Like, no damage at all, just like a little crack in the windshield. So she's like, what happened? Like, I'm going crazy. We have that again later on in the book, like many chapters ahead, where she and Patch are riding a roller coaster together, and she thinks her seatbelt comes undone and the door flies open and she flies out of the roller coaster. So it seems like Patch has done this to her, and it makes us question, is like, was Patch the guy in the ski mask who jumped in front of her car? Like, is this guy scary? Which, it's hard to buy that on a reread knowing that he's the love interest. Back a little bit, V and Nora are very curious about bad boy Patch, and so they go to break into the school's record room so they can look at his file. This, among many other things, make this book very dated because there's no physical record room of files. There's no e-zines anymore. There's no driving a stick shift Dodge Neon. I bet a modern reader would probably not even know what a clutch is. But they break into the record room and his file is empty, so she still doesn't know anything about him. Then they meet 2 other boys. We have Elliot and Jules. Elliot is also a transfer student, who comes in a couple days after Patch shows up, and he's kind of like a prep school jock type, and he also has a thing for Nora. I don't remember Elliot as a character, so obviously this isn't like a big deal. Jules is kind of an asshole, and V has a thing for him, but he's just rude and ignores her all the time, and just anytime she tries to talk to him, he just like rolls his eyes and walks away. So of course, implying that he's more desirable because of the rejection, which is bullshit. We've got a bunch of like minor scenes that don't really mean anything, that are like minor interactions, and in one of them, she's wearing lip gloss of all things. It's just lip gloss, and Patch like wipes it off of her lips, and he's like, "You look better without makeup." And then she stops wearing makeup after that, which is just the red flags. Red flags everywhere. We've also seen Patch speak with her like mind to mind, and then she tries to like call him out on it. He's like, "Girl, you sound crazy. No one's talking to you in your mind." I mean, he is, but he's gaslighting her because that's what bad boys do. The only other character of note that I want to bring up at this point is a girl named Marcy. She's like a cheerleader, and she's kind of like a bully. And pretty much any scene that we've seen with her, she just comes up to V and makes some snarky remark about how V's fat. She's kind of bullying Nora, but not to the extent that she bullies V. Mostly anytime one of the hotties are talking to Nora, Marcy will be like, "You know, I'm better than that girl." And so far, that's what's going on in the book. It's very immature, very dated. It is fast-paced, and some weird things are happening, so there's this like air of mystery. It's like, what's going on with Patch? I know you're supposed to think that he might be a bad guy, but I know he's the love interest, so I can't think he's the bad guy. I don't know who the bad guy is right now. Check-in time again, only because something ridiculous just happened and I wanted to talk about it, but I'm at chapter 20. So we have a couple more instances of the like screwing with people's minds thing that Patch seems to be doing. Patch, or this creepy guy in a ski mask that keeps showing up. We assume it's Patch, but he uses his powers to make it where her phone doesn't, it seems like it's turned off, like the battery's completely dead, and he uses this as an excuse to drive her home from the carnival theme park thing that they're at. And of course he has a motorcycle. Of course he has a motorcycle. Later that week, Nora and V are shopping at Victoria's Secret because of course they got to be talking lingerie and about how big V's boobs are, and Nora feels like she's being followed, and for some reason they think the best way to deal with Nora being followed is for V to take Nora's jacket, and it's raining, and so like covering her face with an umbrella, and pretend to be Nora and just walk to the cemetery. And I'm not sure where the logic in that was, because instead of Nora being attacked, or instead of them being together and potentially not being attacked because they're, you know, two people, V gets mugged and her purse is stolen and her arm's broken and she ends up in the hospital. And so we have some interactions with the hospital and stuff like that. Nothing really interesting there other than that was kind of a dumb teenage decision that I'm not really sure what they were thinking about. We meet a new character who is Miss Green. She's the new school psychologist, and she's really, really big on telling Nora to stay away from Patch. Like, she knows like situations that Nora has been with Patch that she shouldn't really know about, and she's like, "I'm disappointed in you, Nora. I told you to stay away from him." And that's a little on the weird side, and Miss Green here is a little bit suspicious. My boyfriend's watching Twitch, and apparently Moon Moon is very loud, so let's shut the door and get a little bit more silence on here. So maybe later that day, just a couple of scenes later, I guess, Nora is at the library doing some research for her e-zine, and she decides that she's going to Google both Patch and Elliot, the two men in her life. And she Googles Patch and absolutely nothing comes up. And then she Googles Elliot and finds out that he was questioned by the police in suspicion with a murder at the prep school that he went to. She shares this with V, and this causes some sort of like rift between the two of them. Like after reading this and after some situations that she's having with Elliot after that, she's like super creeped out by Elliot and thinks that he might be a murderer, and just suddenly becomes like super uncomfortable with him. And it's really interesting reading from her perspective in these, because as far as I can tell, Elliot has not changed. He's acting the exact same way. She just knows this new information, and so her perspective on Elliot has completely changed. V thinks that Patch is the one who attacked her because the guy in the mask has the same built, roughly the same height as Patch. So V thinks Patch attacked her, so V doesn't like Patch. And then she says she's dating Elliot's friend, Jules, and that she goes over to Jules' house all the time and hangs out with him, but Nora has not had any interactions with Jules at all. And then she knows Jules and Elliot are really good friends and is creeped out by Elliot now. So she's like, "Hey V, I don't think you should be around Jules, and you shouldn't be hanging out with Elliot." And V's like, "You're just making shit up, and I don't have any of these bad vibes for these guys that you have, but I think you need to stay away from Patch." And to be honest, I kind of agree with both of them. Like, stay away from all of these boys, but Patch definitely gives off Edward and Twilight vibes, like a little too clingy, a little too stalkery type thing, but he's the love interest. Like, we know she's gonna end up with Patch. It is what it is. Marcy, our resident bully, gets into a verbal altercation with Nora at the library, and the security guard catches them like shit-talking each other and calling each other names, and is like, "Hey ladies, you need to break it up." Marcy leaves out the front door, and Nora doesn't want to go outside, doesn't want to follow Marcy, doesn't want to continue this fight, so she goes out the back door through the parking garage, where she like freaks out walking through the parking garage because she thinks the masked guy's going to show up, but instead Pat shows up and then he drives her home again. Once she gets home, the police show up at her house again, and apparently Marcy's been attacked and assaulted, and they're like, we heard you had a altercation with her. Did you do this? Can you prove that you didn't do this? And then she tells them that she's with her biology partner, who is Patch, and they're like, oh, so your boyfriend beat her up on your behalf. We need to speak with him. Which, okay, sure. The police are at her house like a day after her altercation with Marcy, because she's about to go on a date with Patch to the biker bar arcade thing that he hangs out with. So I also want to talk about her outfit, because this is the most early 2000s outfit ever. She's wearing what they call pencil tight skinny jeans, ballet flats, and then she's taken a scarf and wrapped it around her waist and pulled it up like this, like a halter top. So she's wearing a scarf as a top. And if that is not the most early 2010s outfit, I don't know what is. It did everything for me. So she goes on this date to the arcade pool bar place. And it's really funny because they keep talking about like the former owner was killed in a bar fight here, and there was a shooting there a couple of years ago that her mother mentions. It's an arcade. It's an arcade. I want you to imagine this place is a scary biker bar, but it's a fucking arcade. Dave and Buster's biker bar is really what this place is supposed to be, and it makes my whole world. But anyway, they're there, and this guy Rickson shows up, which is a brand new character. He apparently is one of Patch's friends, and they like get into a fist fight and a tussle, and they're playing around, doing their do-bro thing, and Patch's shirt rips, and Nora sees a V-shaped scar on his back, and then this is where it goes wild. Like, she's stuck on this V-shaped scar. Like, I mean, it's a big V-shaped scar on his back. Like, I get it. It's a huge scar. But for some reason, from seeing a scar on a man's back, she jumps into, he's a fallen angel. She sees this scar, remembers that on the Archangel ride at the beachfront amusement park that they went to, there's like scenes depicting this angel having his wings ripped off. And that angel in the picture of a roller coaster has the same scar as Patch. So Patch must be a fallen angel. And then she gets on her IBM computer with dial-up to do research on fallen angels and reads a bunch of news articles. And I swear, it's the scene from Twilight where Bella's like, I know what you are. And Edward's like, say it. Vampire. Except for Patch isn't there. But it's literally her just being like, he's a fallen angel. And he's trying to make me do evil so he can take over my body during this Jewish holiday where angels can take over human bodies, because that's what she found on her Google search about fallen angels. What the fuck? This is like the biggest leap, even for a 16-year-old. This is a lot of a leap. And I couldn't help but like laugh out loud at like the absurdity of it. And it's even funnier because he is a fallen angel. But no one comes to this conclusion because of a V-shaped scar on somebody's back. Like, that's all she's going off of, is this stupid fucking scar on his back. But I'm excited for her confronting him about being an angel and finding out that she's right, because that's the only place this is going. So I'm gonna finish the book and I'll check back in with you at the end to give you all of the ridiculously juicy details. I'm done with Hush Hush, and it was honestly like non-stop jam-pack action from the last check-in till the end of this book. Does my hair look like this whole time? So I'm gonna try to go over this as quickly as possible, but a lot happened. Nora has jumped to these conclusions about Patch and his angel scars on his back. Elliot shows up at her house, and he gets like violent and angry and starts like slamming things and pushing her around when she tells him he can't come in. And basically he's like, we're going camping this weekend, you, me, V, and Jules. Nora's like, no. And he's like, I'm gonna hurt you until you agree to go camping with us. And he like starts to attack her, and her mom shows up. And her mom's like, hey, what's going on here, kids? And so he like runs away, and Nora basically calls V right away, and V's like, hey, I hear we're going camping this weekend. And Nora's like, no, we're not. Like, Elliot just attacked me. And V's like, oh, he's been under a lot of stress. Maybe he was drinking. He'll feel bad. It just makes a bunch of like really shitty excuses for this guy who's abusive. Kind of makes V look bad, but it's really just saying something about society as a whole, that a girl would make an excuse for a guy being abusive like that. They continue the conversation, and Nora's like, hey, can I borrow your car? I want to go to Portland, Maine, not Oregon, and check up on this girl that I think Elliot killed. She wants to do some sleuthing and like meet her friends and go to where she works and stuff like that. And V's like, yeah, I'll let you borrow my car if you agree to go camping with us. And Nora's like, no. And she ends up just taking the bus. So she goes up to Portland, again, Maine, and goes to this chick's former job, which is like a diner, and like gets the lowdown on how creepy Elliot and Jules are from another waitress at the diner. That wasn't important. From there, she leaves, gets on a bus, and V calls and is like, "Hey, I'm up here in Portland as well, and Jules and Elliot abandoned me at a party in a really shitty neighborhood. Can you come get me?" And again, Nora's being stupid, and she just like gets on the off the bus and walks through this shitty neighborhood. And I swear this is the scene from Twilight. Like, you guys, I'm pretty sure this is Twilight fanfiction. There's so many scenes. Like I said at the beginning that I thought it was a ripoff of the Shadowhunter series, but it's really a ripoff of Twilight. The Nephilim thing is the only thing that has in common with the Shadowhunter series, but this is Twilight. She ends up in this really shitty neighborhood, gets lost, and a homeless woman is like, "I'll tell you where you need to go if you give me your coat and your hat, because it's cold." And so Nora does. Woman gives her directions. She walks like down a side street or whatever, and this car pulls up to the homeless woman and shoots her and kills her. And so she freaks out, realizes that her cell phone's gone. It's in the coat on this now dead homeless woman. And so she runs to a phone booth and calls Patch. And so Patch comes and picks her up. He starts to drive her back home, and for some reason his car breaks down and they have to stay overnight in a hotel, in a shady motel room, which is just like the most bizarre thing. Like, forget about V, don't worry about going to find her anymore, we're just gonna go into this shitty hotel room and share a king-size bed. When they get into this hotel room, they start making out, and she ends up touching the scars on his back, which apparently suck her into a memory where he is talking to her guidance counselor, Miss Green, and who is apparently a angel, a non-fallen angel, and basically she's telling Patch that he can get his wings back if he saves the life of a human. And he goes, "Well, which human am I supposed to save?" And she says, "Nora Gray." And he said, "Who am I saving her from?" And she goes, "You're trying to kill her." So apparently Patch started talking to Nora and started this whole thing because he's planning to kill her. But of course, he fell in love with her instead, so he doesn't want to kill her anymore. He's dropped that plan and now he's in love with her. The whole reason he wants to kill her is super fucking complicated, but I'm going to try to explain it in the easiest way possible. Basically, in order for a fallen angel to become human, they have to kill their Nephilim. And a Nephilim is an immortal, half-human, half-angel body that fallen angels can possess for 2 weeks every year. They have to do this because they don't feel anything. They feel emotions, but they have like no physical. While he can like touch Nora and kiss her, he doesn't feel anything from it physically. He feels it emotionally, he doesn't feel it physically. So that's why he needs the Nephilim. But Nephilim are immortal, like angels, and they can't be killed. The only way they can be killed is for a female descendant of a Nephilim to sacrifice her own life, and then the Nephilim dies. So what Patch was planning to do is to get Nora to sacrifice herself. Chauncey, his Nephilim, would die, and then Patch gets to become human and live a human life. Because apparently he became a fallen angel because he wanted to be human. He fell in lust with a human woman centuries ago, something like that. But now he's decided that he's just going to stay a fallen angel because he's in love with Nora and obviously doesn't want her to die. It's not worth him feeling if he can't be with her. Patch is just like trying to explain it to her, decides to take her home instead of seducing her, and magically he was faking the car breaking down, so he just drives her home, drops her off, and she mentions that when she's seeing these things, when she touched his scar, that she recognized the angel that he was talking to. And he's like, "Did you know that's the guidance counselor at our school?" And he's like, "Wait, what the fuck? Let me drop you off at home, and then I'm gonna go to the school and check out her files and stuff like that." She's at home, and Miss Guidance Counselor lady shows up and tries to kill Nora because she's like, "Patch is mine. I'm in love with him. I'm gonna kill you. So he has to be a guardian angel, and he can't become human to be with you." It doesn't make any sense, but like, think crazy ex-girlfriend. This lady tries to kill Nora. Patch shows back up and tells Nora to like run, like get in my Jeep, run away, I'll take care of her. So whatever happens to Miss Green happens off page, you don't see it because Patch just takes care of her. Patch tells Nora to go to the amusement park with the Archangel ride, and she decides no, she's not going to do that. She's going to go look for V because she hasn't heard from V since V said that she was at this party hours and hours ago. And so she thinks that V is at a movie theater. Or she calls V's mom, and V's mom's like, "Isn't she at the movies with you?" And so she goes to the movie theater, goes through all the different movies playing, and tries to find V. Doesn't find V, but Patch shows up. And he's like, "Hey, you've got to trust me." And she's like, "I don't want to trust you. You're supposed to kill me, blah, 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 blah." And then while they're arguing, Elliot calls and says, "I have V at the school. Come here now, or I'm going to kill her." And we're like, "We got to go." She tells Patch, like, "We got to go to the school and figure it out." My question here is, if Patch left to go to the school to look through this lady's files, but did he never make it to the school? Like, why didn't he see, like, Elliot and V and Jules at the school when he went to go check on her files? Or specifically, like, that all the doors were chained and the power was out, which would seem suspicious to me if I went to a school. But apparently he never made it, turned around. I don't know. Like, that is a huge plot hole that I just don't know the answer to. So they go to the school, and Patch is like, okay, you stay in the car, I'm gonna go in, rescue V, I'll be back in a minute. So she's sitting in the car, and then Elliot calls, and he's like, I can see you sitting in that car, you better come in now or I'm gonna kill her. And so she goes inside, and the power's out in the school, the power's been cut, she's walking around blindly trying to find V, runs into Jules, and finds out that Jules is actually Chauncey, who is Patch's Nephilim. Chauncey slash Jules wants to kill Nora because he realizes that Patch has fallen in love with her, and he's been alive since like the 15th century, and his body has been taken over 2 weeks every year by Patch to be used however he wants to use him. So he can feel things for 2 weeks a year, but Chauncey doesn't. Like, his consciousness doesn't leave his body when Patch takes over. So he's a little bit rightfully mad and probably pretty insane from that happening for 500 something years. So, you know, I get it. I get Chauncey's problem with this. Patch isn't exactly a great guy here. Chauncey doesn't know that Nora is his descendant and that she needs to be sacrificed, so there's like this whole running through the school being hunted thing. It reminded me a lot of a scene in Vampire Diaries where Elena is running from Stefan through the school, but obviously it's not Patch chasing her. It's also very similar to the end of I Am Number 4 book slash really bad movie. If you have seen either one of those things, you'll get the general vibe of what I'm talking about. So you got a bunch of running through the school. This goes on for pages and pages. There's plot. She finds V. She tries to escape. Blah, 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 blah. Ends up locked inside the gym, climbs into the rafters trying to escape Chauncey, and he follows her up, and he's going to shoot her, and instead of being shot, she decides that if she's going to die anyway, she wants Patch to be human, so she jumps, sacrificing herself in order to kill Chauncey, because if she dies, Chauncey dies, and if Chauncey dies, Patch becomes human. So she jumps, dies, and Patch rejects the sacrifice, so she comes back to life, but Chauncey doesn't have a soul, so he can't come back to life. And then everything is saved, and now he is a guardian angel instead of a fallen angel. But it turns out he's Nora's guardian angel, so he gets to stay with her. And that's pretty much the end of the book. Like, you go through like some chit-chatting with the police and them making out and stuff like that, but that's pretty much the end. It's very complicated. Still not sure what happened to Mrs. Green. She'll probably come back in later books. I can say that this book like ends on a resolution. This could be a standalone. If you read this and didn't want to go any further, there's no huge cliffhanger at the end of this. This could be a standalone book. I'm going to start Crescendo tomorrow because it's 11:30 p.m. Like, I'm not going to start reading this tonight. As far as the 24 hours, I am... Hello? 4 hours and 5 minutes into this, but I'll be back to check in with you in, I mean, literally just a second for you, but tomorrow for me. It's Saturday morning and I'm moving on to Crescendo, but let's do a little bit of chit chat about this before I do. So last night after I finished recording, I went and put my review in on Goodreads, and I want to tell you that the 1-star reviews of this book are so much more entertaining than the actual book itself was. And I noticed like a trend with the complaints and the reasons that this book was given 1 stars that I want to address. So most people like Patch. They're like fine with Patch, no big deal. He's set up as like a mysterious bad boy, and he does that. Like, he succeeds at what his character was supposed to do. Everybody has a problem with Nora, and I kind of get it, but I also want to explain why it didn't bother me so much that I gave this like a 3-star instead of a 1-star. She's very wishy-washy as a character. She has these moments of maturity where she's like, hey, Elliot seems like a bad guy. I don't feel that it's safe to be alone with him. Patch seems like a bad guy. I don't feel it's safe to be alone with him. And she like acknowledges that there's something wrong with both of these men, and that maybe she needs to protect herself from being alone with these men in different situations. And it turns out that she's right. Both men are trying to kill her. But instead of taking that awareness, she will be like, hey, I think Patch is a bad guy. Let me go off by myself alone with him. We have a very specific situation in this book where she finds out that Patch has literally been trying to kill her. Like, his entire plan was to kill her. And within paragraphs later, she's like, I trust him without reservation with my life. And it's like, bitch, are you dumb? So why is she acknowledging like that, hey, these aren't great situations, these men are not good men, but then doing stupid shit like being alone with them or not telling her parents or an adult that she's in trouble? Like, what is going on with that? She's a 16-year-old girl, guys. Maybe I at 16 was very stupid, where I could acknowledge that, hey, this isn't a good situation, but I'll be fine. You have this like complex when you're younger, more so I think in young men, but definitely still exists in young women, where you can acknowledge something is dangerous and something is stupid and have perfect awareness of that, but then sit there and go, it's not gonna happen to me though. Like, yeah, this isn't a great idea, but I'll be fine. You have this like sense of immortality when you're young. You don't expect to die until you're old, so you don't think anything bad could happen to you, even though you could acknowledge that, hey, other thing bad happens to other people, but not me. It's not gonna happen to me. And that's not just 16-year-old kids. I know plenty of adults who have that like complex still. But I think that's what it is. This is Becca Fitzpatrick's debut novel. So the writing's not perfect. It's not even good most of the time. This definitely falls into it's not good, but it's entertaining. And it is clearly Twilight fanfiction. So if you hated Twilight, like, this is Twilight with angels instead of vampires. I honestly wonder if Becca Fitzpatrick is also Mormon, because the Twilight vampires are basically Mormon angels. So doing Twilight vampires as actual angels really, really makes sense from a Mormon point of view. So I'm just very curious about that. But let's go on to the next book, which is Crescendo. According to this back of the book, it's like this is going into the summer. So it's supposed to be Nora and Patch having a romantic summer together, which starts off great, but there's got to be some conflict in the book. So it seems like Patch starts to become distant from Nora, hanging out with Nora's arch nemesis, Marcy Miller, who's just a school bully. For any normal teenager, Marcy would be a big problem, but considering 4 people tried to kill Nora last year, Marcy's not that big of a deal. She's just a bully. It looks like an old family friend named Scott is coming back into town, and Nora is mysteriously drawn to him. Scott is an old family friend. I'm going to assume Scott is a teenage boy that she is mysteriously drawn to and not an adult man, but I could be wrong and completely creeped out in this book. But we're gonna assume Scott is a teenage boy. So it looks like Trouble in Paradise, where Patch is spending time with Marcy and Nora is spending time with Scott. So I'm gonna get into this. Apologies about the noises. The washing machine is right on the other side of this wall, so you can probably hear it in the background. But I'm halfway through Crescendo, so I need to talk about that before I continue reading. Got all this like lovey-dovey, making out, right on the verge of having sex type thing going on at the beginning of the book, and we're kind of experiencing Nora being like super, super happy in this relationship, but from an outsider's perspective, or at least an adult outsider's perspective, this is a really creepy, not so good relationship. You have to remember that Patch is an angel. He is potentially centuries old, and he is dating a 16-year-old child. Although he looks young, like a teenage boy himself, he is not. And their maturity level is like very, very different, and that's pretty obvious. So she's going on about how she feels connected to him emotionally, and if I can't talk to Patch, then who can I talk to? And all of these like very typical teenage girl in her first relationship type of thoughts. And he won't even tell her where he lives. And that's a really big, like, icky imbalance of dynamics in this relationship, but I think we're supposed to see it as like he's still like that mysterious bad boy, even though we found out he's in love with her at the end of the last book. But at the end of this scene, right before they're interrupted by her mother, she tells Patch that I love you, and he kind of like doesn't say anything. A couple of scenes later, we get the miscommunication trope, which you all know is my favorite. I hate the miscommunication trope. Patch has been spending time with Marcy, who, if you guys don't remember, is Nora's like childhood arch nemesis. Like, Marcy would be the bad guy and she's like the bully if there weren't like literal groups of people trying to kill her. Patch has suddenly been spending time with Marcy a lot, and Nora's like, I don't like you spending time with a girl that, like, I hate her, she hates me, we have a really shitty relationship, and I know she is purposely trying to like steal my boyfriend, i.e. Patch, because that's just what Marcy does. Marcy's not a good person. She's kind of a jerk. And Nora's like, why are you spending time with Marcy? Why are you suddenly so concerned with Marcy? And Patch's response to this is to like gaslight her, like really blatantly. He says, I'm trying to tell you what's going on, but you're just being hysterical. And he was not trying to tell her what's going on. He was purposefully trying to change the conversation, and just to tell a girl who's justifiably worried about her boyfriend spending a lot of time with a girl that she doesn't like and has a really bad past history with, and him telling her that she's hysterical in response. Really? And of course now we're gonna drain the water and it's gonna get even louder. This leads into a conversation between Patch and Nora about forbidden love. So after the end of book 1, Patch is now a guardian angel. He's specifically Nora's guardian angel, and the reason he fell the first time is because he came down to Earth because he fell in love with a human woman and wanted to be human. So angels are not allowed to love humans, that's forbidden, and the archangels are watching him to make sure that he doesn't fall in love with another human. Or actually, they want him, they know he's gonna fall in love with Nora, and they want him to fall in love with her so they can rip off his wings again, but instead of making him a fallen angel, they're gonna send him to hell this time. And he kind of like uses his like mind-talking powers to tell Nora about this, and she's like realizing like, hey, this, like, I'm 16 years old, this relationship's really shitty, I'm never going to be able to be with this man, angel, whatever, and I want family. I want children. I want a man who can say out loud that he loves me and will be with me for my whole life. And I don't think I'm going to get that with Patch. I think this is just like a fling, and even if they do love each other, there's no way the relationship will work out, which is pretty mature of her. So she decides that she's going to break up with him and ends it. And then pretty much right after she breaks up with him, she regrets him. She's like, it was just a fight. We're going to talk about it later and make up. It's okay. And just kind of like, it's teenage shit. Like, I get it. Like, she really likes this guy. The relationship's not what it turns out to be. They have a fight, break up, and she figures it's going to be all okay in the morning. But it's not okay. And they keep running into each other, him with Marcy, her with this guy Scott that I'm going to tell you about in just a second. And they get into multiple fights. And in one of the fights, she's like, I don't want you around. I don't ever want to see you again. I don't want you as my guardian angel anymore. He's like, no, take it back. And she's like, no, you can't be my guardian angel. And obviously she is just being a teenager and throwing a hissy fit about it. But apparently he has to take this as face value, and he can't be her guardian angel anymore, so he's not protecting her. And you would think, after all of the enemies in book one, that she doesn't really need protection anymore, but it seems like people are still trying to kill her. From here, let's talk about Scott. So Scott was a friend, a childhood friend of hers. They hung out when they were 5, and then he and his parents moved away, and now his mother divorced his dad, and she has moved back with him. Scott seemed like a really shitty child, and even though both her mom and his mom were like, oh, you guys were such friends, she was like, he held me down and forced me to eat roly-polies. Like, we were not friends. He was mean. And both of their moms were like, oh, he was just a boy. He had a crush on you. And I'm like, oh god, now we're going to justify little boys being shitbags to girls because it's a boys will be boys thing. They literally, in this book, a couple of chapters later, say, boys will be boys. So I am not just making that shit up. We find out pretty quickly that Scott has a temper, and he seems prone to like immediate acts of violence, gambling. He like screamed at his mother, and his mother like freaked out, like she was scared, like he was going to hit her. And we pretty much learn quickly that Scott is not a good guy, and Nora shouldn't be spending time with him. But of course, it's Nora, so she's going to be spending plenty of time with Scott. There's quite a few scenes of Nora spending time with Scott when she shouldn't, and a bunch of like really shitty, scary shit happening. They end up in like another pool hall, like a different pool hall, where there's also like violence and gang activities. I don't know what kind of pool halls there are in Maine, but this is not normal in my brain to have like arcades and pool halls, a place for like violence and stuff like that. But they ended up a pool hall where there's like a shooting, and then Patch saves Nora again. In a lot of repetitive situations like this where Scott gets Nora into these really shitty situations and abandons her. In all of this, we learn that Scott is a Nephilim, like a first generation Nephilim. Like, she's the child of a Nephilim. Scott is actually a Nephilim, and he's just turned 16, which means that he's at the age where a fallen angel is going to force him to give up his body for 2 weeks a year. So Scott's in a bad situation, but he's also just not a good guy. We also discover in all of this that Marcy's father is a Nephilim through a dream that Nora has, and this leads me to believe that Marcy is kind of in the exact same situation that Nora was in the first book, where if somebody kills Marcy, her father's angel will become a human. With Patch being a guardian angel now, he's probably spending time with Marcy simply to protect her from being murdered, which was a very easy leap for me to make, but not an easy leap for a hormonal 16-year-old girl to make. We also have a lot of scenes with V in this book, and V was like a great friend in the first half of the first book and just turned into like a shit show in the second half of the first book, and like in this book. V is very insecure. Like, just the vibes that she gives off is like, I can only date these bad boys who treat me like shit because those are the only men who are ever going to like me, and I'm gonna put out so they stay with me, but in all reality she's just being used. And she makes some really shitty decisions both in the first book and in this book, hanging out with bad boy guys. That's sad, but I also really just don't like V as a character anymore, and I think she's a very bad friend, but she's also a 16-year-old girl who is constantly berated for being overweight. And let me tell you that every single conversation with or about V brings up her weight. Marcy's constantly calling V fat. Everybody who talks about V pretty much calls her fat in some way, or just implies that she eats a lot. Even Nora talks about like, oh, there's no such thing as like one donut when it comes to V, and like other really shitty things like that. And V's constantly talking about being on like a diet, wanting to lose 40 pounds. So again, in this book, we have a scene where Nora has this like wild leap of like, she thinks something that just doesn't make any fucking sense, and it'll probably turn out to be true, which in the first book it was Patch being an angel. Just like, that was like just such a wild leap for her to make. In this book, it's that her father's still alive. Now, her father was killed probably about 2 years ago now. He was mugged and shot, is what we were told. The events that we're learning in this book don't really line up with that, and even though she saw him buried, she's now decided that either he's still alive or his ghost is haunting her and trying to kill her. Because she keeps seeing her father and keeps hearing his voice in her head, but then he wants her to do really scary bad shit and seems to be constantly on the verge of harming her, but she doesn't really know what's going on. And we don't know what's going on either. So we're gonna figure out like what's going on with this like dad thing. So supposedly dead dad, maybe not dead, maybe a ghost haunting her, maybe somebody putting visions in her head again, like that happened a lot in the first book. Towards the middle here, we're starting to get run-ins again with the detective from the first book again, and he's kind of accusing her of making up a bunch of shit. This man is the kind of man who makes it where when women want to go to the police and want like help with something, like he just straight up doesn't believe her. And I mean, fair, all the stuff that she's saying is happening in her head, so she doesn't have the physical proof, but he still treats her like she's the problem, she's making this up, and she's doing bad shit that she's not actually doing, in making her more and more scared to tell any adult of authority, like, the problems that she's having and the fear that she's seeing. Again, in this book, she's also doing stupid shit by, like, walking home by herself in the dark instead of getting a ride from V or Patch, and she's experiencing, like, men chasing her in cars and trying to murder her again. Her thought is, I'm mad at you, so I'm going to walk home to my farm in the middle of fucking nowhere by myself in the middle of the night. Like, she doesn't make the best decisions. But that's where we're at in the book. Again, we have the multiple bad guys. We have the Archangels, who are bad guys as far as her and Patch's relationship go. We have Scott, who he's Nephilim, and he's kind of a jerk, and you just feel like there's something in here that makes him a bad guy, but he hasn't done anything specific yet. It was kind of like Elliot in the first book. Scott's got those same vibes. Then we have the ghost of her father, or whoever that person is, so that's 3 bad guys, and then we have Marcy again. And Marcy is much lower on the scale of bad guys here, but there's still this like dynamic of hatred and bullying coming from Marcy that we continue to see. I'm assuming probably at the end of this book she's going to end up being friends with Marcy, and they're going to have like a girl-to-girl talk and figure out like what went wrong and why Marcy's been a bully for so long. We assume that Marcy's father is also some sort of bad guy because he's a Nephilim. And then we have the Nephilim as a whole as bad guys because there is a group of Nephilim that have formed a cult trying to overthrow Angel's abilities to take them over, which I get. I would also be very unhappy if somebody took over my body and did whatever the fuck they wanted with it for 2 weeks every year and I lived forever. Like, that is problematic in and of itself, so I get it. I get why these Nephilim don't like it, but for some reason, because Patch is an angel and Patch did this for centuries, the Nephilim are the bad guys. We'll see where it goes from there, and I will update you again at the end of this book and run you through all the drama that goes down in the back half. And now, the stunning conclusion to Crescendo. Now, this shit just straight up gets confusing, so bear with me a little bit. From where we left off, we find out that Patch is the Black Hand, which is the guy who supposedly killed her father, and who is, like, recruiting a bunch of Nephilim to do some weird shit, which this whole thing with Patch being the Black Hand just doesn't make any sense. Like, why would a fallen angel help Nephilim overthrow angels when angels have a very narrow view on Nephilim? Apparently they're all monstrous, they shouldn't exist. It's frankly kind of racist. It's like the kind of things that oppressors say to the general public to make the people they're trying to impress like look worse. You see it a lot with black people, with illegal immigrants, like this kind of overview that there's something wrong with Nephilim as a race entirely, and so they deserve to be used by angels. None of that is actually addressed in this book. I don't know if it's going to be addressed in the series, and the Nephilim we meet don't tend to be great people, but it's also like a very small group of Nephilim, and they're constantly being like abused, taken advantage of by the angels. I also have a issue with like the age of Nephilim, because apparently like they don't change, they always look the same, and they have their bodies taken over at the age of 16. So you would think all of these Nephilim look somewhere between like 16 and 20, but apparently Marcy's father is a Nephilim, and if she's 18, he's got to at least look 40, right? Like, does this man look like a 20-year-old? Like, I'm very confused about this whole Nephilim thing. I'm going off on a tangent here. All of this information about Patch being the Black Hand is confirmed by Rickson, who's Patch's best friend, which at the time was like, this seems really suspicious, because none of this makes sense. Is Rickson the bad guy in this one? And yes, he is, but we'll get to that at the end, because we don't actually figure it out until the end. We also find out why Marcy has hated Nora all of these years. Apparently, Marcy caught her father, the Nephilim, and Nora's mother having an affair. And so that's why she's hated Nora. It's because her father's been cheating on her mom, and she blames Nora's mom for it. And because she's a child and can't do anything to Nora's mom about it, she just attacks Nora. Which this will all make a little bit more sense in the end, I guess. From there, we go back and forth with like her continuing to argue with Patch and then her do stupid, dangerous shit. She does her sleuthing shit, which never works out well. So first off, she steals Marcy's diary and then like feels bad about it, doesn't read it, and just returns it. And then that's where the whole situation where Marcy's like, "Did you read it? Did you know that your mother was having an affair with my dad?" And that's where all of that came out. She also wants to search Scott's room and finds one of the Black Hand rings, which Scott is like flipped out about, and he like attacks her and ends up in jail. For like trying to stab her with a knife, trying to get this ring back. And then she also goes to Patch's apartment, which if you remember from the beginning of this, Patch like refused to tell her where he lived. And so Rickson accidentally tells her where Patch's apartment is, but it's not Patch's apartment, it's like a safe house or something like that, a safe house apartment for the Nephilim. And then Rickson goes to blow her up while she's there. I will tell you why in a second. So at the end of the book, they're at the Delphi amusement park again, and Scott breaks out of jail and comes after Nora. So we know Scott is one of the bad guys and he's trying to kill Nora, but with this book series, there's like a trillion bad guys. We already know this. So it's not just Scott. So Scott's attacking Nora, trying to kill her in this park. He's got a gun. Rickson and V are also at the park, see that Scott's chasing Nora. Rickson shoots Scott. Scott's Nephilim, so he's not going to die or anything like that. So that's fine, I guess. I mean, it's not fine, but whatever. And then they all know that Scott's not going to die, so Rickson's like, "We've got to get out of here." And he's like, "V, go get the car." And then he takes her a different way, so Scott follows them and not V, tells V to mate him, whatever. You know how stupid this is. And it turns out that Rickson is also one of the bad guys, as I predicted. His Nephilim is this guy named Barnabas, who was best friends with Patch's Nephilim, Chauncey, but Barnabas is now known as Hank, who is Marcy's father. But not only is Hank Marcy's father, Hank is also Nora's biological father, and his best friend in college was the guy that Nora knew as her father. When Nora's mom got pregnant, Hank was like, "I'm in hiding, she can't know that I'm her father," so her father, the guy that raised her father, marries Hank's pregnant girlfriend and then pretends that Nora is his own child because Hank is his best friend, but he's just a human. So Chauncey is Hank's real best friend because they're both Nephilim, but like college buddy wise, why this guy is God only knows how old and going to college, I don't know. None of this is explained, and it's very unnecessarily complicated. So basically, Rickson is going to kill Nora, so Barnabas / Hank dies, and he gets to become human. Why, when Nora was killed in the first book, when she sacrificed herself in the first book and died, that Barnabas didn't die at that time, since she's apparently the offspring of two Nephilim, I don't know. And if you're wondering how like a Nephilim can have a Nephilim offspring, they technically can't. This was very, very complicated, but I think I got it figured out. Anyway, if an angel and a human have a Nephilim child, any child of the Nephilim is fully human, but female descendants can be sacrificed. So they're like fully human, but still have some essence of their forefathers. So one of Chauncey's human children had sex with a female fallen angel in a Nephilim's body, which created a Nephilim. Instead of a male angel impregnating a female human, it was a male human impregnating a female angel through the Nephilim in some weird fucking way, and that's where Barnabas was born. Barnabas is a descendant of Chauncey through his father's male side, but his mother was a fallen angel, and so that's how you get another Nephilim. And then his daughters are Nora and Marcy. And why Marcy is not being killed is apparently you have to have some sort of birthmark to be the appropriate sacrificed descendant of a Nephilim, and Marcy didn't have that, but Nora did. So a bunch of shit happened as far as like this descendant and her being sacrificed, and it's basically the same plot as the first book, just a different angel trying to sacrifice her, who isn't in love with her. So at the very end of the book, Rickson's been taken to hell by Patch, and she's had a conversation with Scott, and he's kind of disappeared with his like healing Nephilim abilities, whatever. And then Nora's been saved by the police who were looking for her. It's complicated. And Pat shows up at her house and he like explains everything that happened. He's like, "The archangels are gonna come after me, but I want to have like one last night with you before I have to go on a run." And apparently Delphi Park or whatever was built by fallen angels, so the archangels can't come there. And apparently that's where Patch's apartment really is, which why his apartment's in the middle of a theme park. Like, none of this makes sense at this point, guys. Like, I swear to God, none of this makes sense. And so they're actually at his apartment spending like one last night together, and the real Black Hand shows up, because you know there was another bad guy. Of course there's another bad guy. And we find out the Black Hand is actually her father, Hank, shocking no one, and he and a bunch of Nephilim show up, take Patch captive, and he confronts Nora. He's like, "Did you kill my best friend Chauncey?" And then that's where the book ends on a cliffhanger. So the first book ended on a cliffhanger, but this one 100% ended on a cliffhanger. The only other thing that I want to mention is apparently Scott says he's been a dick this whole time because he was told to protect Nora's father on the night that he was killed, and he was being rebellious and was like, "You can't tell me what to do," didn't do it, and now blames himself for her father dying and he's a dick to Nora because of it. But he never really, like, his dickishness was just like him being a angry teenage boy with a bunch of red flags. It wasn't like, I feel bad about killing your father. It was like, I'm entitled to your body kind of dickishness. Again, with all the other confusing shit in here, I think that was also a really bad explanation. So as far as bad guys going into the next book, we have the Archangels, who are looking for Patch. We have Nora's newfound biological father, who has just kidnapped Patch and her. We still have Patch's ex-girlfriend lady, who we don't know what happened to her. So that's at least 3. Scott, I think, is out of the running for being a bad guy in a future book. Rickson is in hell, so he's out of the running for being a bad guy. Chauncey's still dead, not coming back. I think her father is, like, really dead, and the ghost she was seeing was Rickson fucking with her. But there's a little bit of confusion there, because sometimes her dad was nice, and then sometimes he was, like, creepy, scary, Rickson. So maybe her dad's real ghost was haunting him. Whatever happened with that, I'm pretty sure her father, or the man who raised her father, is, like, dead. The bio dad is a bad guy. Again, confusing. Is Marcy still a bad guy? Are they gonna, like, do the sisterly bonding thing in the future? I mean, Marcy was more of a bully, more so than a bad guy. Like, she's not trying to kill Nora. And then we have whatever conversation Nora needs to have with her mother about, like, hey, why marry this man and have him raise me as a father if you're just gonna cheat on him the entire time of your relationship? Did you guys even care about each other? Why would he ever fucking agree to marry this woman and stay with her for 16 or 15, 16 years? Just to protect this little, like, none of that makes sense, guys. But in the end, this seems like a lot of a repeat of the first book with, like, the different plot points and, like, the amount of bad guys and, like, why they're trying to kill Nora. Are we gonna move past this going in the next 2 books, or is that gonna be, like, another repeat of this same story and she's a Nephilim descendant of even more people who are trying to kill her? I don't think so. I think we're gonna move past it now, but I don't really know where this is gonna go. And obviously, this whole, like, argument thing and breaking up with Patch is going to end after this book. Hopefully, I hope we're not going back into this miscommunication shit, which also never made any sense. I mean, it was there to be, like, secretive and Patch is a bad boy, but it never really made any sense, like, why he wouldn't just tell her all of this, like, really basic information if he's in love with her as he supposedly is. Like, none of this makes sense. So, I was mostly annoyed with this, and just, again, how much it doesn't make sense, so I'm going to knock this one down to a 2. And we're going to go into Silence, which is the next book in the series. The back of this one says, after waking up in a cemetery with no memory of the last few months, let alone the last 5 minutes, Nora Gray discovers that she's been missing for weeks. This is annoying me already. Oh, we're getting to this book and she doesn't remember Patch's existence at all. And then she starts hanging out with V again. So V has dated scummy guys in the past 2 books. She dated Chauncey's alter ego for the whole first book and Rickson for the whole second book. So we determine any guy that V is in a relationship with is going to be the bad guy. She's hanging out with V, avoiding her mother's creepy new boyfriend, which I assume is her bio dad that she doesn't remember. And then she meets a mysterious stranger who she's drawn to, which has to be Patch, right? And then she's got to fight for her life again for some fucking reason. It says, Nora discovers that not only is she about to embark on the fight of her life wedged between ancient enemies she can barely comprehend, she's also falling in love. But even with these strange new occurrences happening around her, she can't help but feeling she's done this all before. Oh my god, are we really going to repeat the first 2 stories all over again? But with the Nora lost her memory plotline? Oh, I think I'm gonna throw up. I shouldn't have read the back of that book. I'm super not excited. Not that it was gonna get any better, but I am 8 hours in, which even if these last 2 books take me the 4 hours, whatever each, that still just puts me at 16 hours, and I have 24. So I have plenty of time to get through Silence and then finale. But what is this book about to be? Why did I get myself into this? Okay, it is time for the mid-book check-in on Silence, and compared to the last 2 books, I don't really have as much to say. I mean, I have stuff to say, but not nearly as much. This book seems to be plotted out a little bit slower than the other 2, which is good and bad. Like, honestly, it feels like Becca Fitzpatrick had an idea for one singular book, and then somehow out of that one book got a quartet, or maybe even a trilogy deal that turned into a quartet deal, and she didn't know how else to tell the story, so she's just telling the same story over and over again. This one, a little bit different, but it's still the same, a billion bad guys coming after Nora. Kind of true, kind of not true. So there's still a bunch of bad guys. There's still a lot of people who are trying to kill Nora, but it seems like all of them except for Hank is, like, accidental. So we left off at the end of Crescendo with Hank and his Nephilim minions busting in on Nora and Patch, who are at Patch's apartment making out, right? What happens at the beginning of this book is apparently Hank has kidnapped Nora and makes a deal with Patch that he has to get back in the good graces or whatever of the other fallen angels and spy on them, and that if he does that, then Hank will let Nora go. And they like bargain and all of this weird shit that didn't really make any sense. Hank agrees that he's going to keep Nora to the end of the summer, which is like 3 months, and Patch is going to spy on them, and that Hank and his Nephilim buddies rip off his wings, because he's not a fallen angel yet. Like, he was gonna be, but he wasn't yet. And that was the prologue. So when we get into the actual book, it is Nora waking up in a cemetery on her father's grave. And when I say father in this context, I meant the man who raised her. If I'm talking about Hank, I'm either going to call him Hank or her biological father, just to keep that clear for future reference. So she wakes up on her father's grave, and she has no memory of the past 5 months. And if you listened to me just a second ago, Hank was keeping her for 3 months, not 5 months. So she has no memory of any time from before she met Patch, which that's extra concerning to me, because the whole first 2 books, her falling in love with Patch, almost being killed multiple times, even like this whole breakup and like, I don't have any future with him, so I might as well break up with him now, all of that took place over 2 months. Two months. She's been kidnapped for longer than she ever knew Patch. YA fantasy is very concerning sometimes. So we get past all of that and just basically know that she has no memory of Patch. She has no memory of anything that happened in the first 2 books, which I think personally is a really shitty setup for the 3rd book of the series, but obviously no one asked me. We get back with Nora. She's in the hospital. Other than memory loss, she seems to be fine. She's not malnourished. She doesn't seem to have been abused, but again, absolutely no memory of anything that happened to her in the months leading up to that. Her mother is kind of taking advantage of that, and her mother thinks Patch kidnapped her, right? We know it's Hank, but her mom thinks Patch is the one who kidnapped her, and kind of refuses to tell Nora much about Patch at all, and V also refuses to say anything about Patch. So Nora has no memory of Patch, and no one's like filling her in on anything with Patch. Anybody who does talk about him is not like, oh, this guy was the love of your life. It's, he was this creepy dude who hung around you a lot and you didn't really like him. Stupid shit like that. We should also note that Nora's mom is now dating Hank, which is a huge surprise to Nora, because obviously she doesn't remember anything, but we know that Hank is her biological father. Like, the only reason she married the man that she thought was her father was to like hide Nora. And I don't know why suddenly we don't need to hide. Why divorce his wife now? And like within 3 months of her disappearing, he has divorced his wife and started openly dating her mom. None of this makes sense, but again, I kind of knew none of this was going to make sense. Needless to say, Nora doesn't know anything about Hank, but also knows that she doesn't like him and he's skeevy as hell. Which, to be fair, accurate. We also know that V's memories of Rickson have been wiped, so obviously Nora doesn't remember him because she doesn't remember anything, but it seems like V doesn't know who Rickson is. And I don't know if she's lying about that and she does know who Rickson is, or if her memories have actually been wiped of this man, because she's obviously lying to Nora about who Patch is and a bunch of other like little details around like Patch and other things. Like Nora's asking her and she's like making up stories that are not true. And sometimes it's really obvious to tell that she's lying, because Nora will be like, no, you're lying to me, I can tell. But I'm not sure about the whole Rickson thing. I think Patch like actually wiped her memories about Rickson existence. So we have her dealing with her lost memory and getting into trouble because she does her sleuthing shit all the time. But we also know the Nephilim are looking for an Archangel necklace. Now, I didn't really talk about this because I didn't feel like it was very important in the last book, but at the beginning of the last book, right before she tells Patch she loves him, he gives her a necklace, and then she gives him her father's ring. Apparently, Patch used to be an Archangel before he fell the first time, and that necklace that he gave her is his Archangel necklace. And Hank thinks she still has it, but obviously doesn't remember where it is or anything like that, because Marcy saw her wearing it. She doesn't have this necklace because at some point in one of their many fights in the last book, she takes it off and like throws it at him in a dream, and then wakes up and the necklace isn't there anymore. So she doesn't have it, unless I guess she could have like taken it off and thrown it across the room or something like that, but we just assume that she doesn't have it. Basically what we're seeing over and over in this book is she's getting into situations where she comes into contact again with Patch. First is in a dream, because they've been communicating in the past 2 books through dreams. Her dreams, he'll enter and they can talk to each other, hidden from the archangels. One of the very first things she does when she gets home is she ends up in a dream, instantly remembers who Patch is and starts getting her memory back, and he's like, no, Angel, you can't remember me, it's not safe, and he wipes her memory again. Then she gets into a situation where she's almost killed, because that's what she does, and then Patch shows up to save her, but he's going by Jev now, and she knows she's drawn to him, and she knows that there's something between them, and that they obviously have a past, but she's not putting 2 and 2 together that this Jev guy is Patch, and in person she doesn't seem to remember him as easily as she did in the dream, but she knows there's something with him, she trusts him implicitly. She just thinks he's this dude named Jev, and she can't figure out where she knows Jev from. The only other thing of note in all of her getting herself in a bunch of shitty trouble and Patch coming to save her, just like happened in every other book, is Scott shows up. And I have to appreciate that Scott has changed since the last book, and he's still a problem, and he's still a skeevy teenage boy, but he is not trying to hide anything from Nora. He just straight up tells her everything he knows, which, to be fair, is not that much. He was kind of on the outskirts of everything going on in her life in the last book, and he was always kind of skeevy, so she didn't exactly trust him with like all this secret information and stuff like that. But he does know a lot about like the Nephilim, and he knows that Hank is the Black Hand, and that the Black Hand is the person who kidnapped her. So he kind of spills the beans, is like, you have to be careful around this guy your mother is dating, because he's the guy who kidnapped you, and we don't know why he kidnapped you, why he let you go. We do know he's the leader of the Black Hand and the Nephilim, but what you have to do with it, I don't know. And he doesn't know that Hank's her biological father. He doesn't really know anything about Patch or anything like that. Basically, where we are right now is she just tried to break into a warehouse that belongs to Hank and didn't realize that it was a safe house for Nephilim. And then, of course, Patch shows up and saves her. And she's like, I know. She's like, Jev, I know you mean something to me. Please tell me what's going on. And basically, where I stopped, he had just agreed to tell her everything and fill in the blank. So he's probably gonna tell her that he's Patch and that they love each other and maybe magic her memories all back or something like that. I have no idea what's about to happen. It is a lot slower than the other books so far, and I don't know if that's bad or good. Like, I really am not happy that we're just repeating stuff over and over again because she's lost her memory. Like, the people reading these books did not lose their memory. They know all of this. You're not really giving us anything new. And it's kind of annoying, honestly. Hopefully at this point, Patch is gonna, like, give her all of her memories back or something like that, and we can like get into new territory for readers. It's like 11:30 p.m. 11:21, so I'll probably read a little bit more tonight, but I don't think I'm going to finish it because it takes me about 4 hours to finish this. So 2 more hours. I don't think I'm going to be up at like 1:20 still reading. So read for maybe 40 more minutes, and then I'll be back tomorrow to tell you about the end of this book. Good morning. I have just finished Silence. So the middle of this book seems to be dedicated to like filling in plot holes that we've come across from previous books. I've talked about some of them, like why Hank didn't die and stuff like that, but there's quite a few other little plot holes. Becca Fitzpatrick does this as like Nora's getting her memories back. Mostly she's not remembering it herself. Finally, Patch decides to just tell her everything that's going on, which in and of itself is another plot hole, since she had almost instantly gotten her memory back via dream, and Patch is like, no, you've got to stay away. And he takes her memory again, and then for some reason, for absolutely no reason that I can discern, in the middle of this book, he decides that he's going to tell her all of the things that she's forgotten. And his, like, clues and her touching his, like, wing scars, which allows her to see his memories, helps her unlock her own memory. That kind of leads me into talking about how so many characters' personalities have, like, greatly changed in this book, and I don't really understand why. Like, in the first 2 books, the whole thing with Patch is that he's very brooding and he doesn't share anything. It's a bad boy image, but it kind of comes across as he doesn't trust Nora, which, I mean, I get it. He is an ancient being and she is a 16-year-old child, which means he shouldn't be sexually attracted to her in the first place, but he is, but he's also controlling because he needs to know everything about her, but doesn't share anything with her of his own personal life. For some reason, whenever she actually, like, starts spending time with him in the middle of this book, he's just like an open book and basically tells her anything that she wants to know, and he's like, I trust you, Angel, and it's all your decision. And I don't know where the switch came from, but it's kind of weird because it just seemed to come out of nowhere. Scott also has a different personality, but I think that's a little bit more easily explained, where Scott was, like, angry and violent in the second book because we didn't meet him in the first book. But in this book, he's kind of just like a stupid teenage boy, where he's like joking around and flirting, and he's mostly chill, kind of teenage boy skeevy, but a lot more happy-go-lucky in this book than he was in the last one. And I think the switch with that is mainly he was kind of a bad guy in the second book, and in this book, he's Nora's friend. I was fine with until like the end. At the end of this book, after the acknowledgements, there is like a bonus diary entry for Scott that makes him like extra skeevy. So I probably shouldn't have read that, but unfortunately, I did read it. V is also different in this book, which is also kind of explained, but not really explained. We don't get as much of V in this book as we did in the past 2 books, but what we do get of her, she's much more mellowed out. There is not a single mention of her weight or her eating habits in this book, which I appreciate because the fat phobia was kind of gross and definitely overdone. What interactions we did get with V is she's very much anti-men now, and Patch explains it away. He was trying to help her when Nora went missing and erased all memory of Rixon, and when he did that, she fought it, and she doesn't know why, but she distrusts Patch because he wiped her memory, even though she doesn't remember him wiping her memory. And she also kind of hung on to something of Rixon and knows that some man fucked with her real bad and used her, but she doesn't remember it happening, so she just has a general distrust of all men. Also skeevy on Patch's part. Like, Patch is not a good romantic interest. He's really not. Then there's a few instances that happen throughout the rest of this book that I just kind of want to mention in case they come up in the next book, but I don't feel like they were super, super important to the story. First off, For some reason, Marcy nominates Nora for homecoming attendant, like the junior homecoming attendant. But homecoming doesn't happen in this book. I don't know if homecoming was supposed to happen and Nora missed it because of all the action going down at the end of this book, or if we're going to get homecoming at the beginning of the next book. Like, I'm very iffy on the time frame, but they did like a lot of homecoming stuff in this book that was just kind of not acknowledged again, and I'm not sure why there was so much homecoming stuff if she doesn't actually go to homecoming. Speaking of the fashion of, I want to say this is like 2010, 2011, copyright 2011. So her homecoming dress is short argyle. And I picture this like sleeveless where it's like a sweetheart top and then it hits like the natural waist and then flares out and it's just head to toe argyle. I can 100% picture this dress. And she's talking about how this is the most beautiful dress she's ever seen. And Patch is like, that dress is so sexy on you. And I can't imagine an argyle dress being sexy on legitimately anybody. The lore that we're given is, we know at the end of the second book, Patch took Rixen to hell. But in this book it is explained like how angels go to hell is when they fall, their feathers are ripped out, but the archangels keep one feather, and sometimes they have like extra leftover feathers, and if you burn a feather, then that traps the angel in hell, fallen or not. And at the end, or no, at the beginning of this book, in the prologue, in order for Patch to blend in with the fallen angels, his wings are ripped out again, and when Nora wakes up after being missing for 3 months, she wakes up in the cemetery in the same spot that Patch's wings were ripped out, and then finds a feather that's one of his rings, and for some reason she's drawn to this random black feather and keeps it. And obviously once we've been told that if you burn an angel's feather, that's how they get trapped in hell, we know somebody's going to try to trap Patch in hell, because why else would they bring up the fact that she found this feather? And she doesn't know that it's his feather, and he doesn't know that she even has this. So all that being said, somebody, mainly Hank, is going to try to burn one of Patch's feathers and trap him in hell. We also finally have the return of Dabra, whatever her name is. According to Patch, chill now and doesn't have anything, or isn't interested in him anymore, and she's helping out the other fallen angels, which turns out isn't true. But she's not trying to kill Nora anymore, she's actually trying to kill Patch, and apparently he can keep control of her because he has one of her feathers, and so that's why he can trust her. That's also where we learned that if you burn an angel's feather, that they get trapped in hell. So whatever, she ended up being there, but like only the vaguest sense of importance. Like, she was like not even a secondary character, she was like in like the 5th or 6th row, where she showed up a couple of times and did some things. There was definitely a way to do the plot of this book without having her ever show up. But once Nora gets her memory back, the thing that she's trying to do is like get rid of Hank. But we have to remember that Nephilim are immortal and he can't be killed unless you kill his female descendant, which we've already done because that's Nora. None of that fucking makes sense, but it is explained away at the end of the book. I'll get to that in a second. But like the thing that she keeps going on and on about is, Patch promised me that I could help take down Hank, that I would be able to kill Hank, that he's not going to do it alone. And none of that makes any sense at any point throughout the book, because she is human. Patch is immortal, can't be killed. Hank is immortal, can't be killed. They're trying to figure out a way to kill him, but why would a 16-year-old human girl, or I guess she's 17 by this time, have any like say or ability to kill this guy? Like, that doesn't make sense, that A, Patch would promise it, or that she's so obsessed with killing this man. Like, get him out of your life, yeah, but you don't need to kill him. It's so extreme for this girl's personality. It just doesn't. The only reason it makes sense is to put her in unnecessary danger, so Patch has to save her. Which I hate, but that's the purpose of it. Nora ends up in Hank's clutches again because Scott does something stupid, which doesn't, again, that plot point didn't really make sense because Hank is dating Nora's mom. He could have literally just taken her out of the house at any time. We've seen him mind control her. Like, none of this was necessary, but it happened. And Hank's big plan is to use devil magic, or hell magic, what is it called? Devilcraft. That's what it's called. He uses devilcraft to turn her into a full-blooded Nephilim instead of the descendant of a Nephilim, where he uses his blood to do a transfusion on her and then makes her give some sort of oath that she will become a Nephilim in order to save her mother and V's life. Why, do you ask? Does Hank want her to become a full-blooded Nephilim? Well, apparently he thinks that it's a prophecy that he's going to die, and he wants her to lead his army after he dies. Does that sound like it doesn't make any sense? Because why would you have a daughter that hates you lead an army? Why not just give it to your second in command in the army? Like, what good is giving this army to this daughter who wants nothing to do with you or your kind and is literally dating a fallen angel going to do for you? Right? Yeah, that's not explained. I have no idea. Apparently because he was Chauncey's descendant and she is his descendant, apparently that's the reason we're given. It doesn't make sense. So we like filled a bunch of the plot holes just to get more plot holes. And the answer to the plot hole of why didn't Hank die when Chauncey died, it's apparently because the Archangels prevented it, thinking that Hank was better than Chauncey, and now they've decided that, oops, we were wrong, we're gonna make him not immortal for 24 hours so Patch can kill him. Okay, sure, I guess. And Patch obviously brings in Nora, and he's like, I will, like, here's a gun, he's mortal now, you can kill him, but I think it's gonna be bad for you emotionally and mentally to kill your biological father, or really kill anybody, because, you know, like, killing people is usually frowned upon, so I'm willing to do it for you. And Nora's like, no, I don't think we should kill him at all. That's a too easy way out for him, and we're just going to keep him locked up forever. And Patch is like, oh my god, I love you, and then they start making out. And at this point, Hank pulls out like a lighter and Patch's feather, and he starts to put them together because he's going to trap Patch in hell, and Nora grabs a gun and shoots him in the head, and he dies. So now she is the heir to his Nephilim army. Basically, that's how the book ends, is she's been told that you're the heir apparent, you're in charge, and she's like, okay, I want all the Nephilim to stand down, and we're not going to try to fight the fallen angels. And the Nephilim are like, if you tell us to do this, you will be our enemy. So are you going to side with us, or are you going to side with the fallen angels? And so she knows that she's going to war. She just doesn't know if the enemy is going to be the Nephilim, the fallen angels, or even the archangels. And there's no good decision in front of her. Patch, even though he's hated Nephilim this whole time, doesn't seem to give a shit that she's Nephilim. And he's just happy that she's immortal and they can be together forever. She's also worried about what Nephilim babies, what a Nephilim and a fallen angel baby would be like, and so she doesn't want to have sex with him yet. Keep in mind, she's 17 years old and doesn't think anything about protection or birth control or anything. It is pure abstinence because she's afraid of what their babies will be. The more I read this, the more sure that I am that Becca Fitzpatrick is Mormon, and I know I could go on Google and look it up, but I don't want to. I'm writing my own fanfic in my head where this woman is a Mormon, and writing weird Mormon fanfic. In the end, this book felt like what you normally get out of a second book, but it's the third book where it's just kind of like world building and setting up like a big plot for the end of the story, for the finale. I hate it. From there, we're going into finale. I will check in the halfway point just like I have all the other ones. I am 10 minutes under 12 hours in, so I will definitely hit this under the 24-hour mark. Let's read the back of this book and see what we're getting into. Nora and Patch were ready to put the past behind them. Thank you for the snoring noises. But Nora has unwittingly become the head of the Nephilim, and she has to lead them to destroy the fallen angels, and the only person she has ever loved. Patch is doing some sleuthing work while Nora is trying to convince the Nephilim that the fight with the fallen angels is a mistake. But she finds herself drawn to the addictive power of the Nephilim in the Black Hand. And even Patch may not help her find her way back from the addiction. Will love finally overcome? Okay, we are at the halfway point check-in for finale, and out of all of the books so far, this is the most, like, off the rails, like, what the fuck is happening? To this point in the series, while the stories were kind of goofy and there were some plot holes, this one just loses the plot entirely. Like, what the shit is going on? These books have apparently always been in first person, where it's like Nora is telling the story and she's like, I did this, I did that, blah 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 blah. But for some reason, the very first chapter of this just straight up reads like a diary entry. My name is Nora Gray, and while I used to be an average American teen, buying clothes at the J. Crew outlet and spending my babysitting money on iTunes, Normal and I have recently become perfect strangers. Like, why does it suddenly read like a diary entry? What is going on there? Okay, so at the end of the previous book, basically Nora became the head of the Black Hand because she made an oath as a Nephilim that, I think it was almost word for word, that if her father dies, then she will lead the Nephilim, right? That's like, it was very simple, feels like it's got a lot of loopholes in it, right? And some loopholes they take advantage of with that. Like, she doesn't have to lead them to war. Apparently the Nephilim have the ability to vote her out, and if they do, she will die. Which I'm not sure how they came to that conclusion off of an oath that said, if my father dies, I will lead the Nephilim. But that's the big conclusion we've come to with this. So even though no one trusts her, she's been a Nephilim for like 2 days. she's got to figure out how to prove to them that she can indeed lead them, and she's going to save them from the fallen angels, because the time that they can possess the Nephilim's body is like 48 hours away or something like that. So as part of Nora convincing the Nephilim to allow her to lead, she can't be dating a fallen angel, especially one as like evil as Patch has been, supposedly in the past, like before he met Nora and fell in love and became a good person. We're not gonna even get into that, but she needs to be seen dating another Nephilim, and it's originally proposed that she dates Scott, but she can't pretend date Scott because apparently V suddenly has a crush on Scott, and it would betray her friendship if she's seen trying to steal her best friend's man, which, since when does V have a thing for Scott? Like, where did this come from? Scott has been in 3 books, plenty of interactions with V, and V has never shown the slightest bit of interest in him at all, until Nora's like, but V has a crush on Scott, so I can't pretend date Scott. So her second option is her, like, second in charge guy, who has sworn an oath that he will see that Nora succeeds, or else he dies, so he knows that she doesn't want to do this, and she's still with Patch and everything like that, but he's helping her anyway because he'll die if he doesn't. That kind of makes sense. It's stupid, but it does make sense. Nora's supposed to be fake dating this guy. The problem with that is this is a grown-ass adult male. Nora's a 17-year-old high school student. This man has been alive since the 18th century, but appears to be like a 23, 24-year-old man. So even if we do the like vampire, fairy, angel, Nephilim logic, where you can appear to be a human of a certain age and that makes you that age even if you've been alive for centuries, he's still like a 23-year-old man apparently dating a 17-year-old child, which is super fucking skeevy and not addressed at all. This guy's name is Dante. He's kind of important, but mostly just skeevy. Like, literally. His entire personality is to prepare her to succeed as a Nephilim, as the leader of the Nephilim, and to be skeevy. Just like all the men in this book. What is with skeevy men? Again, we just talked about her personality is back to just being about how fat she is. So we got one book break from it, but now we're back to it. Though V's not showing up. She was here a lot at the beginning, but as we get to the middle of the book, it's less and less V. Moving on from there, I want to share with you the best quote I've ever read, ever in a book. And by best, I mean I couldn't stop laughing for like 10 minutes, just because of the teen melodrama of it. And it was, I lost Patch once before, and not to be melodramatic, but death would be preferable. Like, this woman really wrote those words and published them in a book. And that pretty much sets the tone for how bad this entire book has been so far. Marcy's always also back, and she has decided to move in with Nora. This is what I'm talking about, like the continual plot holes. It's like, why is Marcy moving in? What purpose does that serve? They're not even, like, the only people who know for sure that Hank is dead is Patch and Nora. He's missing to the rest of the world. Everybody assumes he's dead, but only Patch and Nora know for sure, and they're not telling anybody. And Marcy decides that her dad must be dead, and now she wants to spend time with her newfound sister. Marcy has a mother. Marcy's mother's alive and well. Her parents got divorced, but why the fuck would she move in? Why? It's conveniently explained away with like Hank's mind control means that both moms are very susceptible to letting the girls do whatever they want, just to please Hank, but what the fuck? It's a tiny, tiny thread holding this plot together, and it's frayed at every turn. From there, we're going back to Dante and their relationship, their fake relationship. He is training her to like do Nephilim stuff, because she's a 2-day, 3-day old Nephilim, so he's training her to be stronger, faster, use her mind control powers and stuff like that. And apparently he decides to cross the line with her sexually and mind control her to be sexually attracted to him and like want to be in bed with him and make out with him, even though he knows perfectly well that she's in a relationship and that she's not interested in him, even though he knows perfectly well that that's skeevy as shit. And whether she's in a relationship with Patch or not, or anybody, forcing a girl to do sexual things with you is skeevy as fuck. And the way that it is handled, she breaks the mind control and she's like, this is not okay. But instead of, you were violating my trust, you were not giving me a choice here, like all that's fucked up, it's, I belong to Patch. Do you know what he's going to do to you? And it's like, no, child, you are your own person and you have a right to say no to a man without your boyfriend being involved in this situation at all. So instead of the defense here being that you belong to another man, maybe just like, don't sexually assault women? I mean, hello? Speaking of Patch, in the first 3 books, Patch kind of like let her make her own decisions. If she wanted to do something dangerous, he just kind of let her do it. And she was human and very fragile, at least compared to the Nephilim and the fallen angels and the archangels, who are literal immortals and can't be killed unless like a lot of extra fucking magic is involved. Patch just trusted her and treated her like another person and let her make her own decisions, even if they put her at risk. All of a sudden in this book, now that she is a Nephilim and is literally immortal, he thinks she needs to be protected and won't let her do anything. And I get it's for the plot, but why would you change a main character's personality like that? Why would you change the male main character's personality where he trusted her up to this point, and now that she literally can't be killed, he's suddenly going to be overprotective? This is not very good writing, Miss Becca. I get it's for whatever plot point you're trying to make, but that's a wild change to a character's personality. As far as the plot goes, Hank was using something called Devilcraft, which he was going to use to overthrow the fallen angels. Hank was allowed to die because it was assumed that he was the only one who knew about Devilcraft as far as Nephilim went, and that Devilcraft is no longer to exist, or at least be known to exist on Earth with the Nephilim. But apparently, he wasn't the main Devilcraft person of the Nephilim, and Devilcraft is supposed to be magic, like black magic, but in this book it's a drug, and the Nephilim lieutenants have gotten Nora addicted to this drug. And I feel like it's some sort of religious metaphor. Like, we've been talking about Devilcraft, but literally like the last chapter before I pause is when we find out Nora's addicted to this. And it looks like it's blue, it looks like Gatorade, and she's supposed to sip on it, and like one bottle should last like 2-3 days, and she's just chugging it all at once, and then freaked out because she spilled it because some of her drug has spilled, and that means she can't consume the drug. It's got to be some sort of religious metaphor, like drinking the Kool-Aid or something like that. Like, I don't know where this is going, but it is just infinitely worse than the past 3 books. Like, the past 3 books weren't good, but they were entertaining and gave me the ability to entirely suspend my disbelief. Like, I could read it and be like, okay, it's kind of silly, but whatever, I'm entertained. This one, I'm just like, this doesn't make any sense at all. And I can't be entertained because the decisions and the plot just, no reasonable person would think that this makes sense. I'm not finished, so I mean, maybe it can come back. I really doubt it's going to come back, but this definitely should have been one and done. And that seems to be the story with every single series I've read for this video series, where it really should have ended with the first book and never continued on. And this one was kind of promising. Like, it was repetitive for the second book, and the brainwash trope of the third book was pretty fucking ridiculous, but it didn't get just straight up unbelievable until this book. So let me finish this and I'll come do a final check-in, but it's not looking promising. The conclusion to the series is so bad that I almost don't even want to tell you about it, but I'm going to do the quickest run through I possibly can on this thin, frayed thread of a plot line. I just kind of skip to the end, because all of like the build-up and the potential world-building justifications just don't make sense, so I don't even want to go through them. Dante, who's the second-in-command guy, is actually a bad guy, and he has been working for the Fallen Angels this whole time. He thinks the Fallen Angels are going to win, so there's no reason why he should help the Nephilim. He's going to make a deal with the Fallen Angels for protection and survival, and maybe not being possessed or something like that, in exchange for helping them overthrow the Nephilim by overthrowing Nora. So basically he tries to kill Nora, doesn't succeed, and just is like, I don't even need to kill you, I'm just going to tell them that you killed Hank, and that you're working with the Fallen Angels, and they're going to believe me because they've known me for forever, and no one likes you, which, yeah, fair enough, true. So there's been this Archangel throughout this book who's, I didn't even write down his name because I didn't think he was important. What we've been told throughout the book is that he thinks Patch is blackmailing him, and that Patch is not actually blackmailing him. When confronted, we find out that no, he doesn't think Patch is blackmailing him, he knows Dante is blackmailing him, and he wants to hire Patch to kill Dante, because he's doing shit that he's not supposed to, and he's afraid he's going to fall. So Patch says, okay, I'll kill Dante, but I need you to bring me an Archangel dagger that will kill a Nephilim, and we need Nora to succeed so she doesn't die trying to lead the Nephilim, so he has to steal all of the feathers from the Fallen Angels that the Archangels have kept. And so he does that, but he gets waylaid bringing them the feathers by Marcy, which doesn't make any fucking sense. Like, this guy might be a pussy, but he's still a fucking Archangel, and Marcy is a human. She may be the child of 2 Nephilim, but that just makes her a very weak human. That's why Nora is the heir and not Marcy, because Marcy is just expected to die young, and they're surprised that she lived as long as she did. Marcy apparently has been faking being Nora's friend this whole time and moving in with her only to spy on her, and she burns all of the Fallen Angel's feathers, which technically mean the Nephilim have won because every single Fallen Angel is now in hell, including Patch. Nora is obviously devastated. Now, before all of this happened, the plan to stall and to be able to kill Dante was Nora was going to challenge him to a duel, the stabby with swords duel, use this knife from the Archangels to stab him in the heart, which will kill him. Now, this is stupid in the first place. Nora has like less than a day of sword fighting training before she goes into this duel with Dante. And Dante was born in the time of Napoleon. He has centuries of sword fighting experience. Why for any reason, like even if Nora like pretends to be like weak and scared and whatever, he's still a better sword fighter than her. But she has to go to this duel no matter what. Even though Patches died, she's really sad, and V forces her to go. You're asking, like, wait, V's her human friend. Why is V forcing her to go? Why does V even know about any of this? Turns out, V's Nephilim. Why is V Nephilim? Apparently to encourage her to go to this duel after Patch has been sent to hell. I told you, this thread is thin. She's super depressed because Patch is gone forever, but V drags her out to this duel, and then Dante doesn't show up. But all the other Nephilim are there, and they're like, wait, why isn't Dante showing up? Like, they want to support Dante. They don't like Nora. Why would they like Nora? They don't know Nora. They've known Dante for centuries. And then all of a sudden, Dante shows up, leading all of the angels out of hell. And I know you're thinking, like I do, like, why the fuck he decided to betray the Nephilim to the angels because he thought the angels were gonna win. But Marcy, like, accidentally makes it where the Nephilims win. Why the fuck would he bring the angels out of hell if Nephilim have won? Well, turns out he's so amped up on devilcraft that he's made all of the angels swear fealty to him, and he like owns their souls or some stupid shit like that. So he's now leading an army of angels, and then any Nephilim that survive the fight, he's going to make them swear fealty too. So now he is going to be the all-powerful magic something ruler of both fallen angels and Nephilim with his devilcraft. And he's super powerful and blah, blah, blah. But of course, Nora still wins. Nora hunts him down in the middle of this battle and attacks him with a sword. Her goal is to take the sword that he has away from him, because the sword that he has was designed using devilcraft to kill Nephilim that he was originally going to kill her with in the duel. But she just has a regular sword. So she has to defeat this centuries-old guy with hundreds of years of sword fighting experience by taking away his sword and stabbing him with it, when she's been a Nephilim for like 2 weeks and has 12 hours of sword practice. And of course she wins, because duh. She wins because apparently her powers to take over his body are super powerful. And so she breaks into his mind and makes him stab himself with a sword. Was it ever explained by why she's so powerful at this? Absolutely not. No. Also, she got over her drug addiction by just sheer willpower a couple of chapters earlier. Mostly she ran out of the drugs because Dante had abandoned her and she was getting the drugs from Dante, but that's sheer willpower, obviously, how she got over the drugs. How else would a pseudo-Mormon girl get over drugs? As soon as Dante was killed, all of the fallen angels who had come out of hell also instantly died. They didn't go back to hell, they just died because they were being powered by the devilcraft, and when she killed him, all the devilcraft failed to exist. But Patch is still fine, because he didn't swear fealty to get out of hell. He just possessed Rickson and just hitched a ride that way. Does it make sense? Absolutely not. None of this is supposed to make sense. We also find out that Detective Basso, who is the cop that has been harassing Nora nonstop since basically book 1. I mentioned him very briefly at the beginning of this and then just stopped mentioning him because it was only like little snippets of him just coming in and harassing her, and we all know cops are jerks, so didn't really care about him. He wasn't super important to the story, but it turns out he is, because he's an archangel, has been spying on them this whole time, waiting for Nora to completely destroy Devilcraft, because that's what she was destined to do. And as a thank you to Nora for destroying Devilcraft, he grants her the ability to not turn her and Patch into humans, but to keep her as a Nephilim, keep him as a fallen angel, but because they take a blood oath of marriage that has to 100% be based on how Mormons get married. Like, do not ask me to justify or to verify that. I have no idea how Mormons get married, but this is like a sacred blood oath Mormon marriage. And because of this blood oath, Patch can now physically feel things. Not only emotionally feel things, but he can physically feel things. And they've taken this blood oath, and they don't ever need to get married inside a church or anything like that. There's no white dresses in her future. They've made an oath directly to heaven. It literally says that in the book. This is not me being dramatic. Then we get into the epilogue where it's like 3 years later and they're at V's marriage and she's marrying some random human British guy. Scott died in the battle, and Marcy died of her magical weakness that really didn't exist at all as far as we were shown in the book, but she just succumbed to it at some point, and no one attended her funeral because everybody doesn't like her. And Patch and Nora fade to black when they're gonna have sex, because that's it. That's the end of the book. I hope you felt how stupid that was as much as I did right here having to read it. We finished this 15 hours, 24 minutes. Somehow Every book got longer, but it took me less time to read. And I'm not really sure how that happened. I don't know if it's just like more pages and the font got bigger or what happened, but it took me less time to read every single one of those books, and every single one of them just got a few pages longer. Final thoughts, and you already know that I hated this, but I did finally decide when I finished that book to Google Becca Fitzpatrick, and I'm happy to announce that she is indeed a Mormon, and I'm not crazy thinking this is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints fanfiction. Like, these angels in here are Mormon angels, just like the Twilight vampires are Mormon angels. Like, that's how I pegged that she was Mormon, is because Mormonism is kind of weird, and these are Mormon angels. It was really a toss-up between, like, is she Mormon or is this just straight up Twilight fanfiction? And she's at least Mormon, and it still might be Twilight fanfiction. Again, it would have been a lot better if it ended at book 1. I'm gonna give this like a 1.5, 2 star, something in there. Like, this was not good. This was by far the worst book out of this whole thing, and at no point was this series good. It was entertaining at the start. It was entertaining. It was never good. It was entertaining. It is no longer entertaining. It's just bad. That's the end of this video. Thank you for going on this insanely long experience with me. I immensely appreciate you being here. Thank you so much for joining me on this wild freaking adventure, and I should have a poll up sometime in the future, I don't know if it's immediate future or the distant future, with another poll for y'all to pick the next YA speculative series for me to read and rant about. But thank you for being here. I will see you next week for another video. Bye.